The Louhs with your hosts, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Lowe, where we will connect our Orthodox faith to day-to-day living and relationships to our family, our work, and our view of ourselves. Father Nicholas is the priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, and Dr. Roxanne is a licensed clinical psychologist who uses her extensive training in private practice. Questions are welcome by calling 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-2346. Here now is Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Live with the Louhs. My name is Father Nicholas Lowe. I'm the parish priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, Florida. And I'm joined, as always, by my lovely wife, Dr. Roxanne Lowe, who's a clinical psychologist. You know, friends, we're so excited that you're taking the time to join us on this November 9th. You know, Live with the Louhs, our dream behind this show is that it would be a show that would marry both faith and psychology to give you some practical steps to grow in your walk of faith every week. We are so really grounded in this notion of practical Christianity, that we give you the tools that you can actually apply in your everyday life. And so we're excited that you're joining us. And as you know, Live with the Louhs is a show that broadcasts every single Tuesday night live from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time right here on Ancient Faith Radio. You know, before we dive into tonight's topic, we want to encourage you to stay connected to us by joining our social media pages. You know, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, Instagram, we even have a YouTube channel. And they're all under the headings of The Louhs. And that last name is a unique last name. It's spelled L-O-U-H-S. That's The Louhs. In fact, our show right now is currently being broadcast live on our Louhs Facebook page, as well as Ancient Faith's Facebook page as well. And if you're listening to our show tonight and you'd like just maybe some encouragement to get you through every single day, we started almost a year ago sending out daily words of encouragement. And we do this every single day, by the way, that are just, if you love our show, if you love practical Christianity, you'll definitely love these inspirational messages. If you want to start receiving them, go right now during our show and go to thelouhs.com. That's LOUHS.com/subscribe. And all you're going to need to do is simply put in your email address. There's no strings attached. Once you simply put in your email address, beginning tomorrow, you'll start receiving our daily inspirational messages that cover just really a multitude of topics. Tomorrow's message is all about staying in peace with one another. We see so much division in this world. And so how do we stay in peace with one another, and how the Bible says that we're called to make every effort to be at peace with one another? So definitely you want to subscribe to those messages. And we also encourage you to check out our brand new Renewing You Audible version of our book. We're so excited about this because it's recorded actually in our own voices. And we kind of share our own passion. We share our vulnerabilities in our own voices. And it's been so well received. So if you're looking for a Christmas gift right now, we do encourage you to order the Audible version of Renewing You. You can find it again right here on Ancient Faith at store.ancientfaith.com. But we're also on Amazon.com as well as audible.com. And you can also find it on our website at thelouhs.com. And finally, we wanted to share with you about a retreat that Ancient Faith is actually hosting, but they've asked us to speak at. It is a Making Over Your Marriage retreat. And if you're one of these people that, your marriage is at a good place, but, it could go better, it could be stronger, then this is a retreat that I would encourage you to be at. And even if your marriage is struggling and you're looking for some way to kind of give it a little kickstart, this is one that I would encourage you. It's going to be February 18th through the 20th. It's an in-person retreat, February 18th through the 20th at the Antiochian Village in Ligonier, Pennsylvania. And you can find out how to register. This would make a great Christmas gift, by the way. You can go and register at store.ancientfaith.com/events. That's store.ancientfaith.com/events. And we also want to encourage you to join our conversation tonight. We're talking a lot about, I think, a topic that is near and dear to so many of us, not only as individuals, but also if you happen to be a parent, you know that your children are oftentimes utilizing this stuff. So we want to encourage you to join the conversation tonight. The phone number is 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com, or you can also ask a question on our Facebook page, on the Louhs Facebook page. Just simply put it out in the comments question. But we truly believe that growth happens in the conversation.
Well, good evening, everyone. And tonight we are going to be talking about technology. Yes, the big word technology, and just how much it's impacted our lives. Many of us have what I would call a love-hate relationship with technology. I know, Nick, you can relate to that idea. We are on our
Absolutely.
phones, on our computers,
hmm It's
a
like my
lot.
office away from the office.
That's right. That's
hmm
right. And really the internet's only been around for less than 30 years, right? But yet our human behavior has faced monumental changes since its inception.
hmm
And really since the birth of the iPhone 14 years ago, and I only know that because that was the year our son was born,
hmm
um, those changes have become even more pronounced as we've now have this technology, as you said, Nick, right at our fingertips.
hmm
We have 24/7 access to our work, to information, to social media, and to apps of every kind. And so we're going to talk about how this use has changed over the years. But according to a new survey by the Pew Research Center, today, 85% of Americans say they go online every single day. And 31% of US adults now report going online almost constantly.
Wow.
That's a third of us. Almost constant. This number is up from only 21% just 6 years ago. And so these numbers are rising. And now we have only 7% of adults who report not accessing the internet at all. And boy, do I wonder what it would be like to be those folks.
hmm
But we're going to talk about what effect all of this technology use is having on our brains, our well-being, our spiritual lives, and on ourselves as a whole. And here to speak with us tonight is Dr. Randa Anderson. Dr. Anderson is a licensed clinical psychologist. She treats adults, adolescents, and children in her practice. She's a member of the Orthodox Christian Counseling Institute, which is a network of mental health professionals providing services to Orthodox Christians in the Chicagoland area. Dr. Anderson is passionate about integrating concepts from psychology and orthodoxy in ways that can be practically applied to everyday life. She's presented at workshops and retreats all across the Pan-Orthodox community in Chicago. She co-chaired the directory working group for the Task Force on Mental Health of the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops. And that's just a whole lot of words to describe the fact that we now have a directory of mental health professionals for Orthodox Christians across the country. And she will be able to give you information about how to access that website this evening. She was recently elected a president of the OCamper Association, which just stands for the Orthodox Christian Association of Medicine, Psychology, and Religion. Dr. Anderson is married and has 2 young adult sons. Dr. Anderson, welcome to Live with the Louhs.
Well, thank you so much. I am so happy to be here. I have enjoyed your show and I love your book, and I'm delighted to get to sit down and have a conversation with you now.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. And, you've addressed this topic before, this impact of technology on our health, on our wellness. You've talked about it at retreats locally in Chicago, as well as on other podcasts. And we're going to get to how tech use has had some negative impacts on our health. But something that people may not be thinking about is maybe thinking about, could you begin with what positive implications has technology use had for all of us?
Sure. Because, of course, there are many ways in which we use our technology to better our physical, mental, and
hmm
spiritual health, right? For example, my husband and I got Apple Watches last year, and we have
hmm
never exercised so much and so
hmm
consistently in our lives. I mean, to me, that's tech use at
hmm
its best.
hmm
I don't know, something about closing our activity rings or hitting
Right.
10,000 steps is so
Absolutely.
gratifying, right? It's like a little reward that
Exactly.
reinforces. Likewise, people use health apps to track their diet. And we know from studies that if you want to lose weight or just eat healthier, then tracking everything you eat is very helpful. And apps certainly make that convenient. There are mental health related apps like Calm and Headspace, but
Mm.
so many of my clients use these to help them throughout their day to stay relaxed and focused. And of course, there's also apps that help us with our spiritual health as well, like the Daily Bible Reading app, which
hmm
also has daily prayers in it and even info on the saint of the day. And of course, podcasts like your show that are focused on helping people improve their lives in ways that lead to better overall spiritual and mental health are helpful. So, no, technology is certainly not all bad, and I've only mentioned just a few health related apps, but other
Hmm.
technology that helps us with productivity or communications or even the arts are, of course, in some ways related to improving our lives too. But let me emphasize that technology can be used for good and promote health when we are the ones who manage it, and when
Right.
we do not become slaves to our technology and let
Right.
it own us and our time.
Hmm.
I mean, this is sort of interesting, right? I love what you just capitalized on, when we manage it. Here's the question, I guess the big question of the day, right? Because the technology industry has these sort of dopamine labs, right? Who come in and they kind of take a look at apps and they say, hey, how can we get
Hmm.
maximum hits? How can we create maximum addiction? How can we
Right.
play into this sort of reward system that, we're kind of vulnerable to? And
And
then
even recently, Roxanne, in the news, they were talking about a whistleblower within one of the larger social media companies talking about how they were purposefully marketing, uh, you know, uh, to do just that, to make sure that when someone would go to that specific social media program, that they would be they would be on there longer, that it would challenge them in the way in which they look at themselves and how they see themselves. So you're seeing that there's almost an industry within the industry of just kind of creating and utilizing that kind of those kind of
oh yeah, playing into our vulnerabilities. I mean, just like the snack food industry did this with how can we maximize fat, salt, sodium content so that we can kind of play into the reward
Mhm.
system, make
Right.
people lose control. So
That's right.
let's talk about that. How do we manage it when they're playing into our dopamine reward center that is going to get us to respond without our permission and informed
Yeah.
consent?
Right. Well, I want to emphasize what you just said because it's very important. And I talk about it all the time because people will tell me it's so hard. I can't get my kid off their phone. I can't get off my phone. It's so hard. Well, it's
Mhm.
designed to be difficult.
Mhm.
There
Mm-hmm.
are
Mm-hmm.
researchers studying everything, including gee, what color should that little circle that with
Mm-hmm.
notifications be? It's red because somebody studied and determined
Mhm.
that red was the most enticing color to
Mm-hmm.
get you to open an app. So I think people do have to take the reins because the technology will suck you in for sure. Now,
Mhm.
if you're asking for specific tips, I definitely have some of those. And
Mhm.
my
Yeah.
my favorite one of those is, simply turn off notifications on your cell phone so that you're not constantly urged to pick up your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's on the iPhone, there's the screen time built in app. And I believe
Right.
on the Android, it's called Digital Well Being. And you can actually tell your phone to shut itself off if you
Mhm.
only want to limit your Facebook use, let's say, to a half hour a day, you can set the app to turn it off and it
Mhm.
will. I also think going grayscale, you can change your phone so that it's all black and white, gray, instead of lovely, enticing colors.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you can use your phone in such a way that it doesn't. It's not quite as enticing or controlling, and then you can um, put some behavioral controls in place, like having one station in your house where you and everybody else in the family charge the phones so that
Mm.
that's where they live overnight and that's where they live when you're in the house. You don't have to have it in your pocket all the time.
I love that. If
Yeah.
you're just if you're just tuning in to Live with the Louhs, we are speaking with Dr. Randa Anderson. She is a clinical psychologist and also the president of the Orthodox Christian Association of Medicine, Psychology, and Religion. And we're talking tonight about how technology impacts us spiritually, emotionally, and physically. We'd love to hear from you, so please join us in the conversation. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855 237-2346. We also encourage you to email us during our show at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. Dr. Anderson, I couldn't help but when you were commenting on how just, the colors that are studied to see how they benefit us and how they can be much more enticing to us. I mean, this kind of gives us that yes, there are so many great benefits that technology does offer, but there's also a tremendous amount of work that's going in that can kind of in many ways be an unhealthy way. And maybe you could speak a little bit, I think for our listeners that are there, I think it's helpful for us to kind of hear really what are some harmful effects on our health and wellness that technology gives to us.
Sure. Well, you already cited some statistics, but I brought one with me too. And that's that there was a study that reported in 2021, adults pick up their phones 262 times per day.
Wow.
That's a whopping
that's
16
incredible.
times per waking hour. Now, I thought, I'm not sure that's true, but they do say that they asked respondents to refer to their phone's screen time report to determine the average number. So I don't think that was just a self-report. But even if it was only half that,
Wow.
it's a lot, right? So we have to ask ourselves, what does all of that cell phone use do to our mental, physical, and spiritual health? And I would actually like to start by talking and thinking about how excessive technology use can actually lead to a chaotic spiritual life. And this first point is especially important because there aren't that many places where we can actually talk about that or where you hear about it. And so I want to tell your audience about Dr. Jean-Claude Larcher. He is a French Orthodox theology professor, and he has written and spoken on how our tech use impacts our spiritual lives. He believes that excessive tech use is actually disrupting our capacity to grow closer to God. And I'd like to read a quote from him. He says that our use of technology can cause, and I quote, the vain exhaustion of energy, incessant internal movement and noise, an invasive occupation of time, the impossibility of establishing or maintaining inner peace, and the destruction of the attention and concentration necessary for vigilance and prayer. I mean, I know I can relate to this, and I bet many others can too, right? So it's a real concern. And now in terms of physical health, smartphone use can lead to sleep disruption. Medical professionals recommend that we don't look at our screens between a half hour to an hour prior to bedtime, but who listens to that, right? And we know that teens in particular are likely to look at their phones in the middle of the night and are awakened by phone alerts from their friends. And sleep loss can cause a whole host of problems, including depression, fatigue, and poor concentration. Now, I was at the OCamper conference last week, and our medical plenary, Dr. Catherine Kretikos, noted an interesting point about the impact of social media, in particular on our physical health, especially as it relates to COVID-19. She quoted the World Health Organization, who stated, "The unfolding of the COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated how the spread of misinformation amplified on social media and other digital platforms is proving to be as much a threat to global public health as the virus itself." And actually, they made a similar statement about misinformation even before COVID-19. So whether you believe the information or not, social media amplifies, right? Now, emotionally speaking, excessive tech use can lead to weaker relationships with each other, right? We're staring at our screens instead of talking to one another.
Yeah, but you go to restaurants and you see the entire table just playing on their cell phones and no one's communicating with each other.
I mean, even on airplanes, where people used to sit and talk to one another or even think and let the mind rest and look out of a window. If you look around a plane today, every single person has either the phone or the computer out.
That's right.
So your brain doesn't even have that rest that you were mentioning.
It's so funny you mentioned that because I was just on a plane over the weekend, and on the way home, I was sitting in the middle seat and each person on either side of me, they were on their devices. I was on mine and I was having trouble with my internet. And I felt like I was really going to bother the person next to me if I asked her a question, if she was,
Because she was so intent.
right.
Yeah.
But I do remember the days of getting on a plane and striking up a conversation with the person next to me. And it's true, we don't really do that anymore. And worse, I will add worse, I think social media in particular has contributed to some serious divisions in our relationships. So another Ocamper speaker last week, Father Christopher Salami, asserted that social media is designed to be divisive. And I think I agree with that. I mean, how many people do you know who have ended friendships or stopped talking to family members because of arguments on social media, right? Designed to be divisive. This is because we're responding to our screens instead of human beings in the flesh in front of us. And when someone is in front of you, right, you're more likely to be kind or at least civil in your discourse if they're right, if you're talking to them face to face.
I mean, it's interesting. I think the president I believe it was Facebook, actually came out. He's since now stepped down. I do believe that he acknowledged that, that rather than being a connector, it was divisive. It became divisive and may have had some intent to be divisive.
Right.
And there's actually a whole article written on, I think I was reading that about a couple of months ago.
Well, we did that show not too far in the past, in which we kind of talked about how, even on a spiritual level and on an emotional level, how just social media, when you're looking at your news feed and you're looking at everyone's life and what's going on, that in many ways we're looking at people's highlight reel, and it really creates an unhealthy competition, maybe an unhealthy jealousy that takes place, in which you kind of dwell on what you don't have as opposed to what you do have, and then comparing yourself to other people. And so I think it can create that division also internally within yourself, that you are lacking in. Why are all these people having this fun and they're in this relationship and they seem to be happy and they're going on vacation, and why am I not? And I think, again, I think as you mentioned from the very beginning of the show, Dr. Randa, is that I think it's so important of who's has the reins of the technology. Is it the technology leading us, or are we leading it? And in the absence of, control, chaos happens. And I think that's where I think we have to be very cautious about in our own lives, especially when it comes to technology. And so I do encourage all of you, as you're listening, feel free to call and speak to Dr. Anderson. Really maybe share with us how you deal and how you cope with the technology that you have. What are some helpful ways that you found that help you manage your technology, as well as not letting it impact you spiritually, physically, or emotionally? So you can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. And you can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. And if you are on social media right now, we are broadcasting live on our Facebook page. That's the Louhs on Facebook. And so you can do that as well as on Ancient Faith. So shoot us a question that way if you want to, or just share us a comment. We'd love to hear from you all.
So, Dr. Anderson, are there ways we can evaluate whether or not our technology use is problematic? Because I think a lot of people listening to this show tonight would say, yeah, I use my phone a lot. Yeah, of course I do. This is the age of the generation of technology. How do we know when it's a problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I wanted to share with your audience some questions for self-reflection, right, that you can ask yourself and really contemplate. So I'll read a few for you. So for example, do others ever complain about how much time you spend online? Do you skip out on social events or avoid other in-person events to spend time online? Do you get irritated when someone interrupts your time on your device? Do you find yourself missing out on memorable family moments because your device consumes your attention? Do you feel the need to respond to texts or emails or social media alerts when you're in the presence of family or friends? Do you feel anxious if you are without access to your phone for more than a couple of hours? And I will add a little side note to that question. 83% of Americans feel uneasy leaving their phones at home. So ask yourself, when was the last time you felt okay leaving your phone at home? Do you compare your life to other people's lives via social media posts? Do you find it difficult to sit alone with your thoughts in prayer or meditation without a device for 30 minutes or more? I mean, can you even get through liturgy without feeling like you need to check your phone? Right. So I think if you answer yes to these, any of them, it's worth
Right. I love
taking
those
a greater
questions.
look. So those are for self-reflection, but then also, I think I mentioned it earlier, your phone is keeping track of your phone use, right? I mentioned the screen time app and the digital well-being app, and take a look at those statistics on your own phone use, right? And consider for yourself when you see maybe your average screen time just with your phone is, I don't know, 4 hours a day. That's fairly average in America. Think about what you might do with those 4 hours instead. What were you doing with those 4 hours on your phone? Which is another thing your phone will tell you. You know, it breaks down the time as to whether it's social media or productivity or just the good old fashioned phone. Making a phone call. It'll tell you all that.
You know, it's so funny. I love that particular app because I always, for whatever reason, that report always comes to me on Sunday mornings on my way to liturgy.
What is it, the screen time?
Yes, and I love.
Yep.
Yeah,
interesting. I don't receive that.
And and it does. And as I'm reading it, I get so excited when it says you have decreased the amount of services that you. I'm like, thank God, I'm trying my best and I'm doing it. But when it increases, I'm like, oh shucks, I didn't do it. You know, I didn't do a good job this past week. So
So that is one alert I encourage people to turn on their phone, which apparently you and I have it on, but Dr.
Apparently I need to turn this on. Apparently I need to turn it on.
Yes, absolutely. Well, let me, you know, as we're kind of talking about this practical way of us, you know, dealing and managing, because we realize that we need the technology. We want to leverage it for our benefit. I know, obviously, we were talking earlier that our show is being broadcast on Facebook right now, and that we're doing an internet radio show right now as we speak. So you can utilize these types of technologies, these types of resources for the good. And so I love that we're utilizing that. But this question I was thinking about earlier, and I love that it's a question that we all kind of agreed upon, was what's, for our listeners that are listening now, what's a healthy way of thinking about or framing our tech use so that we can find a moderate balance? You know, almost like how would you recommend for us, Dr. Anderson, to think about our tech use in a healthy way so that we're not just kind of dealing with things almost in absolutes? Well, either I'm using technology or I'm not using it.
Right. And I definitely hope I don't come across as saying, oh, it's all bad, because it's not. I mean, like you said, this program tonight, there's a lot of good out there too. So a healthy way of thinking about it, there's an analogy I like to share. It's from Dr. Nicholas Carderas, who also wrote one of my favorite books on technology called Glow Kids. He talks about reframing your use by thinking about whether you're eating digital candy or digital vegetables. So some tech use is like eating candy, right? A little is okay, but too much will make you sick. So a bit of time with video games, social media, news apps, that's fine. But hours and hours online, and before you know it, it's like you've eaten the entire bag of peanut butter cups. Now, right? And digital vegetables are all those apps I mentioned earlier, the productivity apps, the educational tools, podcasts. It's like eating digital vegetables, right? So every time you sit down with your tech, ask yourself if you're about to eat a bag of Snickers or some spinach. And I would even add to that analogy that some tech use is digital poison. And I'd put internet pornography and gambling into the category of digital poison. So think about what you're consuming.
And I think it's interesting. I love that analogy of the digital vegetables and candy, right? But what about, I just thought of this, if the notifications that we turn on are for the vegetables and the ones we turn off are for the candy, maybe the phone, then the notifications serve as reminders to read your daily Bible app, or the scripture that comes in and interrupts something you're doing. Actually, our
Good
daughter
point.
told us that the other day. She was riding on the bus and she said, I was in the middle of doing something and thinking something, and then this scripture came in. And she said it was exactly what I needed to hear.
Yes.
And this Bible study that she's part of also sent out a daily devotional at like 4:00 that day that she needed to hear. And she's like, if I hadn't received that, maybe the next moment would have been different. And so I wonder if we could even turn on or off notifications based on what kind of app it is.
Sure.
Absolutely. And I'll give a little plug for the daily Bible reading app that the GOA puts out. You can actually set it to alert you at the same time every day to read. So that is one of the other alerts I encourage people to actually set on their phone. But you're right. The same is true. What do you have on your home screen, right? So if you keep the productivity apps, the educational apps, the daily Bible reading app on your home screen, that's what you're going to look at first. And, I go as far as to tell people just to take the social media apps off the phone completely. But if you have to have them on, if you really, for whatever reason, need them there, want them there, put them on the last page, make yourself scroll to get to it. And then it's more intentional. Which is what we're talking about, right? Being intentional with our tech use.
So right before we take our break, we do have a caller that's called in to Live with the Louhs. So Amy, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Thank you for taking my call.
Absolutely. Welcome to Live with the Louhs.
Yeah, so my comment was, I have a very dear friend who has EHS, electromagnetic hypersensitivity. So like Wi-Fi makes her, for example, makes her really, really sick if she has like a prolonged exposure to it. Well, today there was like this massive like nationwide like Comcast outage. So a lot of businesses stuff didn't have their Wi-Fi today, and she was telling me like she had a really, really wonderful day. She could go into places and not be sick, and it was just. And absolutely, she was so excited because she had a really great day today. And I'm so happy for her, but it also made me really sad thinking like about how, with the Wi-Fi restored, like she's going to be back to being sick again. And our addiction to constant connectivity, in every store that we go into, every coffee shop, everything has to have like all the advertisers are free at Wi-Fi, and everyone has to be on their devices all the time, everywhere. We make wonderful people like her literally ill sometimes. And I know that's like, it's a less frequently occurring illness. I know that there's like still a lot being discovered about it and stuff, but
that's a great comment.
There aren't
right.
Like,
no,
there
go
aren't
ahead.
a lot of places for people like her to go and not be sick. Like our daily obsession makes her makes people like her suffer a lot.
Right. Well, that I think, Amy, I think that's such a great point. And Dr. Anderson, I mean, I think, to Amy's point, I mean, I think so often we don't even realize, even obviously we're talking about her friend, but and the impact that it has on her physically and emotionally as well, but how just the impact of we've been talking about throughout the show is just how even we're so addicted to it that wherever we go, we want to check out the Wi-Fi password. We often have to go into a hotel and ask that. Maybe speak a little bit about that.
Sure. So, I mean, there's a lot to say there, but one thing that comes to mind that I think is a challenge is that we don't know how to be bored anymore, right? We need the Wi-Fi password in the coffee shop because we don't know how to just sit with our thoughts. But boredom is, sort of the birthplace of creativity, right? And when we're bored, maybe we'll reflect, maybe we'll use our imagination. I think I'm reminded of something my son said to me recently. He was gazing into our backyard and he said, Mom, I'm glad you didn't let us have an Xbox when we were little, because we probably wouldn't have played nights, like we used to, or pretended we were digging a hole to Middle Earth, all of that, right? And
I love how you just shared that that we are uncomfortable now with being bored, and that and it's so true that we just have to have things that just will occupy our mind, occupy our attention, and wow, that was great. I love that.
Yeah. And
We're no, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say,
no, go ahead.
Sorry.
No,
I was just gonna say that you have to think about, what are you not doing because you're online, right? So
right, and the time that we're using away from that, how less productive or unproductive we are when it comes to, because of the amount of time that we're spending. We're going to take a quick break, friends. On the other side of this break, we're going to talk more with Dr. Randa Anderson about how we can become a little bit more just healthier when it comes to technology in our lives. So stay right with us here on Live with the Louhs on Ancient Faith Radio.
Live with the Louhs with Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne will be back in a moment. Give them a call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. They would love to hear from you.
Are you struggling in your walk with Christ? Do you want to rediscover your reason for living, the person you were created to be? Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan gives you the keys to unlock areas of your life that hold you back from fully experiencing the renewal and transformation God has in mind for you. Co-authored by a priest and a psychologist, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Lowe, Renewing You combines principles of spiritual growth with psychological tools to help you become your best self, fully connected with God's purpose for you. To purchase this book, please go to store.ancientfaith.com. That's store.ancientfaith.com.
We're back with Live with the Louhs and Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne. Do you have a question for the Louhs? Call in now at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here once again is Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, welcome back to Live with the Louhs. We're so glad that you're joining us this evening. Before we get back to our show, we just wanted to remind you all that if you're looking for just a daily word of encouragement, a daily word of inspiration in your walk of faith, to go to our website at thelouhs.com. That's LOUHS.com, and click on that subscribe button. Simply put in your email address, and every single day you'll receive a daily word of encouragement that hopefully just will inspire you as you get through the day. We started this about 10 months ago, and we were just so blessed to see what kind of response it is, and really the need that people have in a daily word of encouragement. So definitely take advantage of that.
So I want to go to a question that we just received, and it was when we were talking about the notion of putting down our phones, and you were sort of giving some indications or questions to reflect on if we are struggling with our phone and with our technology. And so this writer is saying, I get anxious when I have to be away from my phone for too long. And I feel as though I have to walk while holding my phone in my hand, and even have my headphones in my ear. And listen, I think that this writer is not very different from so many of us out there. I have to say, my phone, if I go on a walk now, it comes with me. If I go upstairs, I might bring it with me, and so this is something it's become almost like a safety net. The what if I get a call, or what if a text comes in, I have to answer. What would you say, Dr. Anderson, to people who are feeling somewhat anxious about leaving their phone behind?
Yeah, I would say it's probably time to wean yourself off that constant habit, like anything else, right? I mean, and quitting cold turkey is typically not a good idea. Really, anytime you're trying to break a bad habit. And I think that that's how we can think about it. I mean, people throw around the word addiction a lot, but I think most of the time it's really just a bad habit. And how do you break a bad habit? You wean yourself off. So try being in your home with your phone on the kitchen counter and yourself in your home office or in your family room watching TV, whatever, playing a game, whatever. So start there and gradually increase the amount of time you keep your phone out of your physical possession.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I would suggest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, sort of going back to this is sort of going back to the notion of moderate use, because then what happens when we are able to do that and we begin sort of reconditioning, presence of mind in conversation when we otherwise would have been distracted, and sort of all these other sort of valuable things sort of start coming and pouring back in. We're less irritated because we're less interrupted.
Right.
Right.
And we don't feel the need to respond right away. How much have we conditioned people also to expect our response being immediate? I have people saying all the time, well, so-and-so didn't get back with me in the hour or in the day. And like, well, maybe she was busy.
Right.
Maybe it wasn't personal.
Right.
But I do think we've conditioned people in our communities.
That's so true, Roxanne.
To expect that, and if not, to define it as being something that it isn't.
Because you have an instant message, and it's actually called an instant message. And,
that's right.
And people expect that instant message to be responded to instantly. And I think that's so wise what you're sharing, because I think so many people struggle with that. I mean, we get that even here, sometimes people will email me and say, well, Father, I emailed you. And I tell them respectfully, I love you and I care about you, but I'm not sitting at my computer just waiting for an email. When we get to those emails, we try our best to answer them as quickly as we can. But I think that's something that we have trained our minds and our almost
expectations.
Absolutely. That almost in a subconscious type of way that person is there waiting for us to simply to respond to the email that I've just sent them.
Right.
I mean, This is also a struggle in marriages. Somebody wrote in a question here too. My spouse responds to messages that come in when we're in the midst of a conversation. What to do? This is divisive in marriages when one person is on the phone a lot more than the other, and it's distracting the conversation.
Right. So you have to have a conversation about it and let your spouse know how that makes you feel and come to an agreement. I'm going to have to look up the resource and share it with you after the show, but there's actually a contract, an example contract of a digital contract between spouses that you can have where you sit down and decide and agree upon things like no cell phones at the dinner table, or, when we're having a conversation, we leave our phones in our pocket, things like that. No phones in the bedroom. There are things that you can agree on together with your spouse. And then it's up to both of you to keep each other accountable on that agreement.
So, what can you tell us about the impact of technology on mental health specifically? Is it true that social media is associated with increased depression, anxiety, and loneliness?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one that is being studied extensively. And I've taken a look at some of the research. And in general, studies show that when social media is used to enhance existing relationships or create new offline relationships, it is associated with less loneliness or mood problems, but usually only when online and offline worlds overlap. So what do I mean by enhance? When you use your social media to communicate with friends or family, to say set up real world dates or activities, then social media can be a good thing. For example, our Metropolis Youth Ministry in Chicago is very adept at using social media. So they'll post a cute TikTok video to encourage participation at a retreat or a camp. That's fine. That's meeting kids where they're at. Or my nieces will share pictures and videos of their kids, and that makes me happy because I live far away from them and wouldn't otherwise get to see them regularly. So in that way, social media is keeping me connected to my family far away. But when social media is used to replace in-person relationships, that's when it's associated with increased loneliness and sadness. So if it's used to escape or avoid, then that's not healthy. And in terms of mood, there's studies look at different explanations for why people feel sad or anxious after using social media. Father Nick, you already mentioned one, and that's social comparisons, right? We compare ourselves negatively to other people, and that impacts how we feel about ourselves. Mood goes down if you feel excluded or rejected.
Right.
Like when you see other people at a party or an event that you were invited to, Or
Mhm.
I hear teens all the time expressing sadness about being left unopened on Snapchat, right? So
Mm.
they interpret their friends not opening their Snapchat messages as a rejection of their friendship. Um, there's also a phenomenon called the affective forecasting error, which is thinking you'll feel good after using social media, but actually you feel worse. And here's
Right.
something that's really interesting. Studies show that people report feeling worse after being on their social media because they ultimately realize it was time wasted and
Mm.
they feel bad about having wasted their time.
That's
So,
so, that's such interesting because I think it takes a level of an awareness to know that about yourself and to be able to see that, because I think for so many people, Dr. Anderson, I think we just kind of go through the day, we'll check it, and what tended to be just I'll just check it just for a few moments ends up being for 20 or 30 minutes or maybe
right.
even longer than that, and you just kind of keep scrolling and scrolling through the list of your friends, and I think it's, if we're not careful, if we don't have that true awareness, we may not realize, if we're feeling a little bit down, or if we're feeling a little bit depressed, or feeling like a little bit sad that we weren't invited, really why or where that is actually coming from. And I love how you're talking about the fact that, you know, of how, yes, in a healthy way, if there's people in our parish, I know that kind of post just sometimes stories that just are there just to simply give someone a laugh, and I love that because it kind of just gives them, it's like their ministry, and if you use that
Yeah.
platform as a way to inspire people, give them a laugh, or to scripturally encourage them, I think it's great. I think it's what we're always all talking about. But I do think that there is that unhealthiness that can come along with it, the judgment, the condemnation. We saw in this past election how sometimes the news that's being on there, the fake news that could be sometimes utilized on social media, on both sides of this, by the way, can be
Yes.
used in an unhealthy way. And if we're not aware of that, if we're not challenging our own perceptions of what it is, we just simply can take it and just simply believe it. And just because we're seeing it doesn't mean that it's actually what we should be believing. We are talking to Dr. Randa Anderson, who is the president of the Orthodox Christian Association of Medicine, Psychology, and Religion. We're so blessed to have her on our show tonight. And we're talking specifically about how do we manage, how do we try to live a healthy life in this technologically advanced world? We're so advanced. We're at one of the most advanced times in the history of humanity, and everything's at our fingertips. And for many of us, we may not realize just how it's impacting us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. That's what we've been spending time talking to Dr. Randa Anderson about. And we'd love to hear from you. How do you manage your technology? What are some steps that you think have benefited you? Or maybe what are some concerns that you have with your children or your spouse, and how it may be impacting your relationships with them? Give us a call at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question, as we've already gotten several in, at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. One thing I'm really interested in, Dr. Anderson, is really what does the church give us to really help us in managing our tech use in a healthier way?
Sure. Great question. Fasting, plain and simple fasting.
I love that.
Like I noted earlier, Dr. Jean-Claude Larcher has said that all this tech use has created a chaotic inner life that actually works against our attempts to be prayerful and connect with God.
Mm.
And so he's actually been calling for a digital fast to occur alongside the prescribed food fasts of our Orthodox Church. So we can do that by refraining from tech use on fasting days, except what we need to do for school or work. And what's interesting about this is that while we talk about fasting all the time in Orthodoxy, secular healthcare professionals also advocate
Mm-hmm.
for a weekly digital fast. I mean, have you heard of Tech-Free Tuesdays? That's a thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I have not heard of that. That's pretty cool.
yes, it's pretty catchy. So, I think sitting down with yourself first and thinking
Mm-hmm.
about the right time to fast. I'm making the suggestion. The suggestion has been made to have it coincide with our food fast. But you can reflect on those times you tend to grab your phone or go online because you just aren't thinking of anything better to do. Well, that's probably a good, if you have a tendency, a certain day or time during the week when you do that, that's probably a good time to set a fast. And we know in our church, when we fast, we replace that eating activity with prayer and with
with something else,
and with something else. And that's true. Anytime you want to break a habit, you replace it with something healthier, right? So, you read a scripture. If you're trying to grow in your spiritual life, you maybe learn a new hobby, play the piano, cook a meal, do something, call your mother, do something.
Right. And I think just kind of going back to what we were sharing earlier is just how much of a time sucker is our time on in utilizing our technologies, and how much, that's why we were talking earlier about how beneficial that app is to tell you how much you're using your cell phones throughout the week. And I think I just would just to kind of go one step further with what you were saying, Dr. Anderson, is how important it is that we are aware of that not only are we just trying to replace that, but also be aware of just what it's doing in our life, being aware of just how much is impacting how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about others, and because, as you know so well, Dr. Anderson, is what we believe shapes our behaviors. And so what we believe not only about others will shape how we treat others, what we believe about ourselves will shape about how we treat others, as well as, because what's down on the inside always comes out in the outside.
Exactly.
I think even, when you think about this fast, for those of you who think, well, gosh, that sounds so overwhelming, go an entire day without my phone. We could even do that in a stage-wise progression. You think about that. Okay, well, what if we only did our vegetables and we didn't do the candy in a day? Would that be a level of a fast? Maybe we're not going on social media at all, but we're just going on our Bible app, or we're just checking our email if it was necessary for work. Or maybe, if I think about how do I raise my kids with nutrition, you get your dessert every day, but before that, you get all your vegetables, fruits, proteins, and carbs before that, and at the end of the day comes your dessert. So maybe that's when we have our digital candy, is in the evening, because I fit in everything else that was important to my identity, to my spiritual growth. So I think there's really so many ways we can look at setting limits, and sort of creating some level of boundary where we become more in control.
Right.
And how much can we sort of condition a reward from doing that when we see, the church fathers talk a lot about studying ourselves and paying attention to ourselves. And when we take this sort of digital fast or set these limits, what do we notice about ourselves? What are 3 things that change about us? Where does our mind begin to wonder? How do our relationships change? And maybe how does our mood change? I think that this is harder than it seems. Although we're talking about this and we're making all these suggestions, I think that in a practical sense, these are very difficult changes to make because of how the technology industry has sort of played into our vulnerabilities. And so I guess for all of our listeners, I want to say this isn't easy. These steps are not easy, but start where you can. And let's grow from there.
Exactly.
Dr. Anderson, any final tips to folks? I know I wanted to ask you just a little bit about the mental health task force, and people who may be listening who may have questions about their mental health as it relates to technology, as it relates to addiction, or as it relates to even other more deeper wounds that they may be dealing with. Could you talk to our listeners about how they could receive help and what's out there for Orthodox Christians? Absolutely.
Well, real quick, I do want to mention the task force on mental health was formed by the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops because they recognized the need among the people for help in the area of mental health. So it was actually before the pandemic, in September of 2019, working with Ocamper, the Assembly established this task force. And right out of the gate, we identified that what people have been asking for years is a directory of Orthodox mental health providers. I'm sure you have gotten requests for providers from all over the
Right.
country
Right.
because you're known. People probably ask you, and I certainly do as well. I have for years. So I and my co-chair, Presbyterian Julie Honeycutt, led a working group of mental health and substance abuse professionals and parish priests. And we were able to launch this directory about a year ago. And it's, I can just real quick tell your audience, it's housed on the Assembly of Bishops website under the directories tab. All the providers in the directory are licensed or credentialed to practice in their fields. And those licenses are verified by our programs coordinator. Also, all providers in the directory are either Eastern or Oriental Orthodox Christians, and they are verified to be in good standing with their church or parish priest. And the directory is searchable by state. So you type in your state and you will see a list of professionals who are available. And
I
it
love
includes
this.
not just, it's great, right? I mean, it contains not just contact information, but a little more detail, such as who they treat, what kinds of problems they treat, if they have a specialty focus area. And we also ask providers to offer a statement of how they integrate their Orthodox faith with their professional practice. So you get this little tidbit of how they think about faith and practice, which I think is really great.
Well, and I think too, as you were saying, Dr. Anderson, I think it's so important that, we're living in a world where I think for so long people have had this really negative view about psychology, especially within the church world or within the faith world. And the fact that that the Assembly of Bishops have brought this directory together to help just Christians in general find a therapist or a psychologist who has a faith who in Christ that is leaning into their own faith, and that they have chosen to serve and work on this assembly of bishops to be a resource for those who are in need, I think is so beneficial. And I would encourage you all. Can you tell them once again just how that they can get access to this particular directory?
Sure. The website is assemblyofbishops.org, and when they go there, click on the directories link, and it'll take you to, I think, mental health professionals.
Yeah, mental health professionals is one of the directories listed. And I love that it is by state. I have given this referral out probably about 10 times just in the last month. To people calling from all over. As we know, COVID opened up boundaries for telemedicine quite a bit. Some of those have remained open and some of those have not. And so you're going to want to start to look in your state first.
Yes.
But,
yes.
And I think that, Dr. Anderson, unfortunately, we're down to just about 60 seconds left in our show. But I just wanted to also share with our listeners that, we're hoping to do a follow-up show in the next several weeks in which we'll talk about how really we can help guide our children who are, so many of them have access to their cell phones and are utilizing technology in ways that, to be honest with you, for me growing up, I couldn't even imagine that being the way it was. We were still using typewriters, and then, later on, computers that were on there was no, we were still on, our internet services were dial-up, and you would
Remember
take you about
dial-up?
it would take you about 20 minutes to get online. But I think it's so important that we will have a follow-up show to really talk about these things.
Specifically about kids.
Exactly, because I think we're, as parents, I know that Roxana, you and I are definitely someone that would benefit from having you share your wisdom, Dr. Anderson. But we want to thank you for taking the time to spend it with us tonight and having your wisdom and talking to us about just some practical ways that we can all live a healthier life with all the technology that is around us. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Anderson. We appreciate your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. And I would love to come back and talk about technology and children. Very important topic. Absolutely.
And if you've enjoyed our show, we encourage you to tell your friends. Roxanne and I hope and pray that this is simply just a resource for you in your walk of faith. And if it's beneficial to you, whether it be our book or the daily inspirational messages or this show, do us a favor, just simply share it. just simply share it with your friends and your family. You would make us so happy to do so. Join us next week for a brand new show with Live with the Louhs, a show that we're going to be talking about how we learn to let go of the things that are bothering us, how we just simply move on from the things that are hurting us. You don't want to miss this show. So we encourage you to tell your friends about it. Once again, God bless you. Thank you so much to Matushka Trudeau for producing and directing this show. We love her so much and all that she does for us at Ancient Faith. God bless you all and have a great evening.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of the book Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan, which can be purchased at store.ancientfaith.com. Their daily inspirational messages can be found at thelouhs.com/subscribe. Be sure also to search for The Louhs on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Live with the Louhs is a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.
No end of books these days offer us techniques for self-improvement. But in the newest release from the Ancient